Thank you for joining us and welcome to Business Incorporated. I'm Chimezie Obi Iwago. Today on the show, Ghana strengthens capacity to avoid repeat of banking cleanup. Uganda more than triples deposits insurance to boost confidence. Plus, Zimbabwe establishes a monetary policy committee in stability bid. First, we get the show started with the markets and all the numbers coming from the African stock market. We track here we're in the green at intraday. Here in Nigeria, the market appears to be recovering from Tuesday's losses at intraday, with the all-share index up 0.28%. The banking, consumer goods and industrial sectors were trading positive at intraday. In South Africa, the JSE index was also looking good with a 1.24% increase at intraday. It's the same story in Egypt, where the EGX30 was 0.37% positive, also at intraday. Kenya closed 0.16% up on Tuesday. In the Middle East, the markets were mixed at intraday, with Saudi Arabia's stock market dropping to an 8-month low. In Abu Dhabi, the index was up 0.21%, while Dubai's index was down 0.25%, with blue chip developer Emma Properties dropping 0.6%. In Qatar, the index was up 0.88%. The Saudi index dropped to 1.67%. In Europe, stocks traded higher today as investors looked ahead to key central bank meetings, while trade tensions and the risk of a no-deal Brexit have cooled for now. Well, there are other developments investors are keeping an eye on, and Conrad will feed us in with those. Good afternoon, Conrad.
Good afternoon, Chimi, and hi to everyone watching in Nigeria.
Doing great, Conrad. Anyway, the new chief of the EU Commission, the leading body of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, has presented the list of candidates for her team. Any surprises, and what comments are you getting from markets people?
Well, I've been speaking to a couple of people here, and the overall reaction to this panel of people that von der Leyen presented is positive, and some people even said, wow. Not only because the team is really a gender-equal team with 13 women and 14 men, the boss, of course, being Ms. von der Leyen, a woman as well. Never before so many women were part of the leading team of the EU Commission. But also, wow, because this is really probably the most experienced team ever presented to lead the EU Commission. Experienced in terms of having experience in real government. There are a few government leaders, national government leaders in the team, also several members who used to be ministers in national governments. Surprises? Well, I think there are a few, especially one, Paolo Gentiloni. The man is Italian. He is going to be in charge, or he's nominated to become the Economic Affairs Commissioner, which means that he will also be in charge of the debt rules that the different nations of the European Union have to comply with. When Gentiloni was Prime Minister of Italy, he and his government were constantly at odds with the EU Commission about the amount of debt that Italy was allowed to make. So it's of course going to be interesting to see how he tackles his country's, Italy's debt and its constant efforts to make more debt than allowed. Phil Hogan, an Irish Conservative, who is going to be the new Trade Commissioner, which means he's going to be in charge of negotiating a new trade deal with the British after Brexit. This looks like a very clever idea. Then there's not much of a surprise, but also remarkable, Margrethe Vestager, the woman from Denmark, who's going to remain competition commissioner. She also was traded before Ursula von der Leyen's nomination to become the EU Commission chief herself. So the fact that she's now part of the team and also a vice president means that Ursula von der Leyen wants to make sure to include the people who were perceived her competitors before, von der Leyen became the chief. So overall, this really is seen to be a team to make really the European Commission stronger, and with it, the idea of the European Union altogether.
All right, another interesting one out there. The Hong Kong Stock Exchange has launched a bid to take over the stock exchange in London. What's the market reaction, and does this have any implications for market operators on the European continent, like Deutsche Börse, where you are?
Yes, of course, this would likely have major implications because a major new competitor would evolve here, and not only Deutsche Börse but also Euronext, which is the other large markets operator here on the continent, would really find it difficult to compete against such a big player. Whether or not this deal between Hong Kong and London is really going to happen remains to be seen. People I talked to here said, well, especially if we take into consideration what's going on in Hong Kong right now, the protests there, one has to ask whether or not London really wants to be dominated by Hong Kong, a stock exchange operator in a place that's getting more and more in the grip of Beijing and the communist government there. I mean, remember when we talked about the potential merger of Frankfurt Stock Exchange and London Stock Exchange a couple of years ago, this finally did not happen, but because London refused to be dominated by the Germans. People here in Germany wonder whether the proud people in the city of London would really prefer to be dominated by communist China. So lots of question marks attached to it, but of course the speculation is driving stock prices. Shares of the London Stock Exchange have been skyrocketing, and also the shares of Deutsche Börse and also the Euronext are in demand today.
And the last one, Apple has presented new iPhone models, but even more importantly, probably, is the launch of a new streaming service called Apple TV+. Now, are investors buying the story? And do you already have one?
I have to tell you a secret, Jimmy. I'm not an Apple person. I'm an Android person, and I'm using a Windows PC at home, which work quite okay, I have to say. But, of course, I know that Apple has devout friends. One of you sits right in front of me. Jimmy, I know that you are using an iPhone, and you're maybe going to at least think about using Apple TV+, the new streaming service of Apple that was announced yesterday. €4.99 is the designated price, or $4.99. I'm sorry, I don't even know whether it's going to be offered in Nigeria, and I don't know what the price might be. Of course, everyone here is concentrated on what this means for Europe. It's a very competitive price, but it's also a service that, of course, is not going to be able to compete against Netflix or against Disney's planned streaming service, because it's not going to contain the same high-quality content that everybody wants to watch. So that's what a few people I talked to were saying, but they also are saying the community of Apple is so devout, it's very likely that most or many of the Apple users who will be able to subscribe to Apple TV Plus will do it, which means a constant and permanent stream of revenue for Apple, and that's the reason why the share price of Apple is up today. So I would say investors are really buying the story.
Well, yeah, you're right. I use an iPhone, but I don't have any plans of buying the iPhone 11 or whatever it is. Anyway, thank you for your time, Conrad.